Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Chris Spiegel Show. Today I want to actually be discussing a topic that has been on my mind for a couple of years now, and it is a mixture of political issue and also of personal interest and desire. The topic that you may have already seen in the title is called universal base income, and that is something that is basically just getting money for not doing anything. And that is kind of like a cynical way of thinking about it. But the baseline of that is you are part of a country and then you just get a certain amount of money every single month, no matter what. This episode specifically is going to be mostly a thought piece. It is not necessarily perfectly researched. It is the information that I gathered over the years and have that kind of like came to me over that time frame. I think I read a lot about it. However, I did not necessarily read studies in depth, and I did not study the subject matter. I'm mostly just reading about it in articles, in conversations on podcasts. I also have been part of a organization or have been donating to an organization that is doing an experiment in that matter. And also just overall gathering information mostly from Germany as well as the USA, because there, at least in the US, it's currently being discussed quite nicely with the political candidate Andrew Yang, I think. And that makes the whole topic even more interesting, that it is becoming more and more relevant and actually being discussed, not just by someone who wants to have money, but there are really good reasons behind this topic, and there are really good ideas behind it as well. What I'm doing here is not an exhaustive discussion of the whole topic. It's more of an overview of the idea behind it, because of course this is something that is so shifting everything from the core and shaking it all up that you can't ever just get all of it in one go. So I'm just going to basically focus on the topics that are interesting for me, the overview of giving you an idea of what it may be or what it could look like, the desire that stands behind it for a society as well as for the individual, and most specifically talking about why that has been on my mind so much and why it has been something that I've been thinking about and having a craving for. However, I also want to just loop that around to a more or less motivational piece at the end to kind of see where we can take this without waiting, so to say. So I hope this gives you a little bit of an intro to the idea of universal basic income, a couple of my thoughts and ideas about it, and also just a better understanding of what it could look like. And maybe after, you can do your own research into it, look it up, and see what you can do to either pursue it or maybe support certain organizations or political agendas that are striving to do there. And maybe you have the other thoughts and are on the contrary side. I would always love to hear from you in the either comments on the YouTube video or just contacting me via the ways that are available on my website, for example. But now let's go and dive into the basic idea of universal basic income. The overall just basic idea is that universal basic income is based on a country that is doing really well, and at some point they decide that every citizen in that country should get a certain amount of money every single month. The numbers that are generally discussed in this matter are about 1,000 euros or 1,000 US dollars, something around that range, at least for a developed country. Now, there are very, very many aspects as to who should get this, who should not get this. Generally speaking, I would say it's a universal, and in Germany, it's called also without any restrictions income, basically, from the translation in a way, that nobody should be excluded from this. Now, there are certain definitions or questions as to whether or not you should start getting that money right when you are born, or maybe you should get it once you are 18. Those kind of topics are not necessarily something that I want to discuss here, because those are the details and the minute stuff around this topic rather than the idea behind it in general that is really important for me. The reasoning behind implementing something like the Universal Basic Income, or UBI that it's called in the campaign recently, is multifold. On one hand, you have the argument that this is actually preparing for a future where more and more jobs are going to be automated and also taken care of by robots in some sort of sense, or automation and AI and stuff like that. So at some point, we may have a future where not everybody actually has a job to go to and work at and then earn money from that. So with the Universal Basic Income, you would provide people the opportunity to at least either find a new opportunity otherwise, or use that time with their family and be a socially interesting or responsible person. And that kind of like really opens the door for much, much more people to actually be helpful in some way to community and stuff like that. Another interesting idea for me is that it would increase the ability to choose what you want to be doing rather than only going after what actually makes the most money. And this is something that I think actually is quite interesting, because oftentimes I hear people are doing certain work because it actually earns the money that they need to provide for their family. And it's not necessarily to say that that won't be the case when you get 1,000 euros every month, because 1,000 euros isn't necessarily taking care of all the problems in the world for everybody. However, it is a start to just know that your necessities are taken care of, and you may choose to work some job that you actually like better, even though it pays less. Or you may choose to work less hours to be able to do more of a community service, or be part of your own family, have more time for your children, for your loved ones, for people you care for, and such things. However, it also is something that is really interesting to just in general alleviate the stress of your nervous system in terms of like, how am I going to survive on a month-to-month basis? And this is going to be one of those points that I actually think that is why I'm so drawn to it and so inspired by this, because as a freelancer and someone who is trying to build something up, this is something that could greatly reduce the amount of stress that I have on a daily basis, just in terms of seeing how the month unfolds and how much money I will have left over at the end of the month, rather than being able to just focus on the projects that I desire to create. And this is also one of the big aspects that is discussed around this topic as well, which basically is that many people could choose a different path, or go into a new field once they desire so, or find a new interesting thing. So one of those things I would say is people who would be able to study or take up some kind of interesting hobby that then could turn into actually providing more value to other people. It'd also be interesting to be able to do community service, do social work, and those kind of things. Maybe even take on clients that you wouldn't be able to take on because they can't afford you. Like, all of those aspects are really something to say about like having this baseline income where that's something that just is there no matter what. It's going to protect me in case anything else happens, and such thoughts. Like, I think that that's really, really powerful. But of course, with a topic like this, there's a huge divide in terms of positive and negative effects or thoughts about it, because then you have the whole topic of people would just slack off and never work at all. However, that is definitely not what I would think would happen, at least from judging from my own persona and what I would want to be doing. And also in terms of the stories and research that I think that I've seen is really showing that people are much more interested in life and also in helping others and being helpful to a community and also their own development, which can be really supported by this idea. Now let's talk about one of the perfect results or perfect scenarios, what this could look like in a real world scenario, what that could do for someone. If everyone actually earns $1,000 or euros per month, taking care of pretty much any basic expenses, even if you have a apartment that costs more chances are you have a partner or you have your family that you live with that you can pool together and everybody takes their cut. But then you also have money left over in that €1,000 for food, for basic insurances, and also maybe transportation. Those kind of things you can really take care of with that money. And considering that it would be universal basic income and you trust that it actually is something to stay and not something that's going to be gone in a year from now, you could also say that this money actually is money that you don't necessarily have to save up with and actually can use for your monthly expenses, because it is going to be there no matter what. Now, if you want to, you can try to save with that money and put it aside or do something good with it. If you already have more than enough money, you could also donate that extra money. Those kind of thoughts are also in the play. But overall, you just have those basic needs met and those things like shelter, food, and some kind of insurance to be safe overall. Now, for many people, this may not actually be everything that they desire in their life. Maybe you want a more expensive apartment. Maybe you want to have a more expensive car and those kind of things. Or maybe you want to have different experiences in terms of world travel, similar things. Then it actually is necessary to simply keep working. However, having the backing behind you to take care of those basic needs, you can then make a choice to work on the thing that actually is inspiring to you. And this is something that kind of like goes in with my idea of my desire for this, is basically saying that, yes, I can actually focus on what I want to be doing rather than having to work on certain projects because I need the money. And that's actually something that I think is really, really huge, because I believe that the world would be a much more creative place, a place with much more freedom and expression and pleasure. And just having this overall system in place that people can use to express and create and have that freedom and that time to do so without having to worry about the next month's paycheck to take care of their monthly expenses. So if you need work, you can choose to work less. You can choose to work at a job that you like better, but it may pay less than the job that you would choose otherwise. And the other options would be to either start something completely from scratch yourself, building a business, building your own ideas. Just having that backing of your livelihood is actually something that I think is just super powerful, because you can really take a different kind of risk with that. How many business ideas are not created or not developed because the person having the idea just doesn't have the opportunity to risk that kind of structure, to go away from their normal job, go away from the paycheck and just take all that risk themselves. And I think that also for a country, it actually is really, really interesting to have these kind of people that are able to create these new ideas, because that's what drives us as a society forward. And also not just as a society, but actually as a species of humankind that can also be transformed by much more creative energy in that way. These are also the ideas that I at least read about in terms of the success stories of experiments and research projects that have done these kind of things with giving people this kind of income for sometimes for a year or sometimes for a couple of years at a time. And they generally, at least that what I read into it, is that people are more socially engaged in their community. They help more. They are generally happier and also more fulfilled and easygoing, and just having more freedom to pursue what they actually are passionate about, what they desire to do, and where they want to go and head. And of course, you have the people that choose to travel the world or choose to do different activities. However, that also is something that develops themselves. And maybe at some point they will bring something else, something special that they have taken from that journey, to bring that back to other people and either inspire or create something and bring that whole thing again back into society. And that is really something that's quite powerful. Now, all those things considered, why is it that I am so drawn to this idea and this concept? And I think that it's actually been years at this point that I have this secret wish that I would eventually either be chosen for one of those projects or experiments and get that kind of money, that kind of support for a year. I even talked about this kind of topic with parents and grandparents to actually get that kind of support for a year, for example, to have a stretch of time to create something. And I even thought about going to banks and asking for a loan for basically business development and doing that, which would kind of be a similar thing. However, it comes with a whole different structure of pressure to actually have to perform in that year, which can be a good thing, but it also is something that makes me held back again. This is, again, the whole topic of this being universal and everybody gets it no matter how long, and it is not a loan that you have to pay back, which makes a huge difference in the freedom and the pressure that you can feel. And at least for me, it really is a hard thing to know that this is something that's going to be gone away again. This is something that someone else is paying me, so I have to pay them back. Those structures are very, very different from the idea of having this unconditionally. In this process of building my business, I had this desire many, many times to have this kind of income, have the safety net below me that would catch me whether or not my business idea works out. All things considered, pretty much any startup that you create or any business that's out there with venture capital and such things, those businesses function on the same basis. Someone invests into an idea and then they get the money to actually make that happen in a certain amount of time. And those things are great. However, they come with the same structures and the same pain points and punishments that I just mentioned before, that you feel that pressure of having to perform and having to do this really driven and goal-oriented, whether you want it or not. And that's something that I think takes away the freedom and the creativity. So my personal thought is that having that baseline income, having that unconditional income would give me a huge amount of freedom and creative energy, unblocking me from what I am doing and giving me the opportunity to go into the ideas and the passions that I desire to create. Actually put in more work into the products and the videos and the newsletters and such things, rather than having to spend time on client work, having to go and get a normal job and those kind of thoughts, just to come by and make it work. And I also oftentimes catch myself having these ideas where I think I see so many people making money with X, whether that's dropshipping, Amazon FBA, or Kindle publishing or something like that. And I often see people do that with borderline shady methods, and I don't necessarily like that. However, I understand where it's coming from. It is because it is driven by that desire to make as much money as possible, live a certain lifestyle, and also it is driven by the easy money. So making money with dropshipping and just using Facebook advertisement and such methods is really something that makes those things possible. However, it is something that may not be necessarily very beneficial to a society as a whole. At least that's what I am personally grappling with. I'm not necessarily saying that I would never do that and that all of those people that do those things are bad for society in a sense. However, I think that many people would choose differently if they could focus on something that has more meaning rather than, I don't know, selling fidget spinners or something like that. So I catch myself every now and then where I think maybe I should just do this easy money because it is easy money and it would be able to provide for my lifestyle. However, then I also am taken back and say like, no, this is actually not what I want. I have my passion in other avenues. However, I only have a certain amount of time that I can spend there. So maybe I have to focus on certain things with less time, make them quicker, be more make them quicker and just create faster. And with that comes a certain loss in quality. And that is something that I don't necessarily like. However, it is what it is at that moment. Just a couple days ago, I actually saw a video from Cody, who actually founded the #NoSmallCreator community and those things. And he did do YouTube full time for, I think, a year, maybe a little more at this point. And recently he uploaded a video where he said that he's actually quitting full-time YouTube, whatever that means for that matter, because I think that YouTubers oftentimes are very many things, not necessarily just a YouTuber. But what he was referring to essentially came down to this idea that he's going to start doing client work again, freelance gigs, consulting, as well as product development and YouTube as well. And that really comes back to that idea that his success on YouTube may not be enough to have a stable, conclusive income over the long run, which in turn makes him choose certain video topics and ideas because they make money, because they are driving his viewership faster, and he might not be that interested in those topics, but they are the ones that make the money. And that's something, again, that can be alleviated as you have enough income. And one of the ideas that could support this whole process is something like the universal basic income. I guess the big question for myself in this topic and in this exploration is, why do I really hold on to that idea so much? Why do I desire this so much that I could have this external force, this external energy pool of money coming into my life and supporting me and giving me the freedom, even though I have the power in me to do client work, to do freelance jobs, and maybe even just be a little more structured, and with that, drive my whole business faster. And that, again, comes back to basically the flip side of this whole coin of universal basic income, which could be that at the end of the day, it really is about your own motivation and your own desire to make something happen. Do you let yourself be distracted by all the things that you can consume all day, or are you working on what you want to be working on? Do you create a new video, or do you watch someone else's video? And those questions, those are the hard ones for many people to answer. And I think that that's something that is really hard to answer for myself, because I catch myself so often. But then again, it is the whole idea that this universal basic income would alleviate the stress behind the creation, would alleviate many of the fears and the pressure that is on me or on the person in general to perform very, very quickly, very well, and have certain things work out with a certain speed. Otherwise, you're going to drive against a wall. And getting that creative freedom, I think, is really something that we could use a lot more of. So I do think that universal basic income or unconditional basic income are really interesting thoughts and ideas for a society going forward. However, being motivated enough and wanting to have something similar to this, we can already do that ourselves as well. Creating a business or creating a YouTube channel, building assets, building products online, starting to sell products or services, starting to offer your own skills in different ways, be it consulting or be it developing websites for people, doing video work and photography. You can do so many things in this world that you could create additional income for yourself. And at least from my perspective, as a freelancer and someone who wants to create more content, build a content existence basically around YouTube and Instagram, Skillshare, and those kind of things, it really is up to us to take this into our own hands. And these more or less passive income ways where you invest into it for a certain amount of time, where you have to do both at the same time, where you have to juggle your normal income-driven work with the creative or passion-driven work, those things juggling, you can actually at some point flip it over to the place where you're like, yes, now I am in a place where my actual creative passion business will make more than the other side. And ideally, you can already have the income-based business being something that you also are passionate about. But even if that's not necessarily possible or the case, make the best of it as long as you need to, and then switch over. And I think for me, overall, it is actually just letting go of those fears, knowing that I have the structure and the baseline for it. I have the work that I need to sustain myself. And in the rest of the time, I desire and am working on uncovering more and more of the fears and the ideas that are holding me back. The watching other creators mania, so to say. Just recently on my newsletter, I actually also included a couple of those questions that I am asking myself to start to develop more of an understanding of what is going on here. And what I'm getting at are those questions saying, who am I becoming? Will I be missing the old me? And what about those activities that I love so much? And that question is coming up because basically what I am expecting from stepping into the door of new that is already opening slowly, even this couple of weeks and months right now, I am noticing that I want to be someone else. I want to be someone who is way more driven and focused on that creative aspect, that passion-driven work. And at the same time, this comes at a cost. And am I willing to pay that cost? Am I willing to invest to create my own universal basic income? Am I willing to actually step into that new person? And those questions that I'm just writing there, they really turn into these explorations of who am I if I don't watch YouTube? Who am I if I'm not up to date on all that information? Who am I if I don't learn this specific skill that I'm not actually needing, but is really intriguing right now? Am I able to go into the aspect that also Tim Ferriss and other people have talked about in terms of just-in-time learning? So learning something when it's necessary and not 3 or 5 years ahead of time. I know this from myself. I spend so much time and energy in learning things and exploring ideas and getting the news in certain areas that I am holding my creative outlet back. And of course, there are different reasons and fears and anxieties attached to this, where it's like, why am I doing this? It's probably because there is something that is saying like, hold, don't go further here. You are about to make a video which may or may not be embarrassing. And who are you to do those things? Like, those ego-driven thoughts come up, and that's not really easy to hold all of those back all the time. So then something easy, some procrastination turns into the play, and that's where it really becomes derailed. And that's what I want to hook into more and more, to actually say like, no, I have my plan. I have a step-by-step process that I'm following and I'm working right now. And all of the distractions, I'm going to just put them right here and I'm going to come back to them later. I'm going to check in with that list of distractions, because if I don't, then I start to mistrust myself. But eventually I will get back to those. But in that meantime, I'm going to just focus on what I set out to do in the first place. And that really is something that I'm telling to myself even right now as I am speaking it to you. It's something that I need to incorporate more and more of into my life, into my daily routine, to stay on target, build and create, because the day definitely has enough hours, and there are many people out there who have done what I desire to be doing. There are so many people that build blogs, YouTube channels, and other kinds of businesses, even while they were doing a lot of work in their normal job or in their freelance career and so on. Eventually, you are able to switch over. However, for the time being, you might have to hustle. And the real question is, how important is this for you? Are you willing to put in the work, or are you willing to step away from the things that you like and just focus on the work? Eventually creating your own universal basic income so that you can live the life of freedom and creativity that you desire, or at least for me, that I desire. With all those ideas out in the world here, I really wonder what you think about universal basic income and also about the inspiration and the motivation for yourself to create something similar for you. Are you already in the job that you love and it's passionate at and you don't really want anything else? Or are you still on your path there, and what are you doing to reach that point? Are you willing to make sacrifices and step away from your activities that are holding you back to become a new person, to develop a new character that may not even need those procrastinative behaviors anymore? That's really the goal, and that's really something that I'm striving for, and I hope that you too can reach that. And let me know in the comments your thoughts about all of this with the universal basic income and with that way to getting to that point. And I will see you in the next one, and let's see how all of this will unfold and create a new reality for all of us. I will see you in the next one, and until then, have an amazing day. Ciao, ciao.